The Galactic Council had stood for 15 millennia, a monument to peace and cooperation among the stars. 300 species had gathered under its banner, each pledging to uphold the sacred laws that governed civilized space. War was a distant memory, a primitive concept relegated to history archives. The Council's peacekeepers maintained order, and disputes were resolved through diplomacy and mediation. Coraline had always believed in that peace. As a human delegate's daughter, she'd grown up in the gleaming halls of the Council's headquarters on Centrum Prime, playing with children of a dozen different species, learning their languages and customs. She'd believed the galaxy was safe, that the old ways of violence and conquest were truly behind them. She'd been wrong. The day everything changed started like any other. Coraline was in the gardens with her friend Jox, a human boy whose parents served in the diplomatic corps. They were studying for their xenobiology exam, sprawled on the luminescent grass beneath trees that hummed softly in the artificial breeze. "Do you think we'll ever get to visit Earth?" Jox asked, looking up at the star-filled dome above them. "The real Earth, I mean. Not just the VR simulations." Coraline smiled. "Maybe. My mum says humanity's been petitioning for a cultural exchange program." She stopped mid-sentence as alarms began blaring throughout the compound. They looked at each other in confusion. In 15,000 years, those alarms had never sounded. What happened next would be seared into Coraline's memory forever. Council peacekeepers, beings she'd trusted, species she'd considered friends, stormed into the human quarters. They weren't there to protect. They were there to take. Coraline and Jox ran, along with dozens of other human children, but there was nowhere to go. The peacekeepers herded them into transport ships with cold efficiency. Parents screamed and fought, but they were subdued, restrained, forced to watch as their children were loaded onto vessels like cargo. "Why?" Coraline's mother cried, held back by 4 armored Vexian guards. "We've done nothing. We've violated no laws." Ambassador Kaltor, a serpentine being who had shared meals with Coraline's family, barely looked at them. "The Council has made its decision. Humanity has grown too quickly, advanced too fast. You are a potential threat. Your children will be educated properly, raised to understand their place in the galactic order." The transport ships departed, carrying 140 human children into the void. What the Council didn't understand, what they couldn't understand, was what they had just awakened. JAX held Coraline's hand in the darkness of their cell aboard the prison station. Around them, human children huddled together, some crying, others silent with shock. They'd been traveling for 3 days, and no one would tell them where they were going or what would happen to them. "They made a mistake," Jox whispered, his voice harder than Coraline had ever heard it. "They don't know what humans are capable of." He was right, but not in the way he thought. The message reached Earth 72 hours after the abduction in the halls of the human assembly. Representatives sat in stunned silence as they watched the recordings. Their children taken, their embassy staff beaten, their protests ignored. 15,000 years, President Sarah Chen said quietly, her hands gripping the podium until her knuckles turned white. 15,000 years we've played by their rules. We limited our expansion. We shared our technology. We bent ourselves into shapes that made them comfortable. She looked up, and those who saw her eyes in that moment would later say they'd glimpsed something ancient and terrible. And they took our children. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in recorded galactic history, humanity went to war. The Council had forgotten or never truly understood where humanity came from. They knew humans as diplomats, scientists, artists. They'd never seen Earth's history. The wars, the struggles, the countless generations who'd fought and died and dragged themselves up from the mud through sheer, stubborn will. They'd never understood that humanity's kindness was a choice, not a weakness. The human fleets emerged from slipspace with a fury that shocked the galaxy. Ships built in secret over decades of paranoid preparation, because humanity had never truly forgotten how to wage war, only chosen not to descend it upon Council. Space like an avenging storm. Coraline felt the station shudder as explosions rocked its exterior. Alarms blared, and their captors ran in panic. Through the narrow window of their cell, she saw human destroyers, sleek and deadly, their weapons turning automated defenses into expanding clouds of debris. They came, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. They actually came. Did you ever doubt they would? Jox asked, smiling for the first time in days. Ambassador Kelthor stood before the Emergency Council Assembly, his scales pale with fear. They're not following any civilized rules of engagement. They're hitting military and government targets simultaneously across 17 systems. Our peacekeeping forces are in full retreat. How? Demanded High Counselor Vreen, her crystalline form flickering with agitation. Our intelligence said humanity had perhaps 200 ships of war. We're detecting thousands. They lied, Kelthor said simply. Or we underestimated. They've been preparing for this possibility since they joined the Council. They smiled and cooperated and built their doomsday fleet in the shadows of their outer colonies. Then we must negotiate. They're not answering our hails. Their only message is return to children. It took humanity 73 hours to locate the prison station. Another 6 hours to fight their way through its defenses. The rescue team that breached Coraline and Jox's cell were like nothing the children had seen before. Human soldiers in combat armor, moving with lethal precision, their weapons never wavering. Are you all right? The team leader asked, her voice gentle despite the chaos around them. We're taking you home. As they were escorted to safety, Coraline saw the aftermath of humanity's wrath. Council ships drifted as burning hulks. Stations that had housed their captors were dark and lifeless. And everywhere, human vessels maintained a perimeter, their weapons still hot, still ready. The Council surrendered on the 4th day. The terms were simple: complete withdrawal from human space, reparations for the families affected, and the dismantling of the Council's military apparatus. The 15,000-year peace was over, but in its place came something else, a galaxy that finally understood that humanity's cooperation had been a gift, not submission. Coraline stood with Jox on the observation deck of the flagship as they approached Earth. The blue-green marble hung in space before them, beautiful and terrible and home. Do you think things will ever be the same? She asked quietly. Jox shook his head. No, but maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe the galaxy needed to learn that peace doesn't mean powerlessness. That kindness doesn't mean weakness. Coraline nodded, watching as Earth grew larger in the viewport. Humanity had broken 15,000 years of peace. But they'd done something more important. They'd proven that some things, like protecting their children, were worth any price, and the galaxy would never forget it.